Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ben Rose. I'm a Solution Consultancy Manager at Logistex. This afternoon, I'm going to be talking to you about the future of warehouse automation. So warehouse automation is no longer strictly a technology deployment question. It's more about a strategic approach. So across supply chains, we're facing multiple structural pressures, be it persistent labour volatility in the marketplace, rising surface expectations, so customers looking at same day or even in urban contexts, same hour delivery. And we're also looking at things like increasing SKU proliferation, especially in e-com environments. So the question is no longer really whether we should automate. Now it's more a question of how do we automate in a way that creates resilient, scalable, and commercially adaptive warehouses to serve our businesses over the next decade. And that's what I'd like to explore in today's slides. So historically, automation investment has been strictly framed around ROI models, looking at number of FTEs in a warehouse, I'm sorry, the slides are slightly different to the ones I've got on my slide deck. Existing ROI models looked purely at labour replacement, so reducing a headcount in a warehouse, reducing operating costs, justifying an ROI. What we're seeing more now as sort of a new generation of KPIs are things like throughput elasticity, so the difference between peak and median in a warehouse. How do you scale your operations to deal with things like Black Friday, e-com special offers, seasonality in a warehouse as well. We've also got service differentiation, so I mentioned lead times, predictability and resilience, so based on orders in the cloud, how many orders are you expecting? Are you going to have the right stock in the right place at the right time? Automation is now becoming a mechanism for controlling variability rather than simply reducing those costs. The organizations are gaining more value are those treating automation as a performance and risk strategy, not just strictly about reducing headcount. I had to include a photo of a bipedal robot in this presentation because I'm a massive robotics geek. This isn't science fiction anymore. I think we are going to see bipedal robots in UK warehouses within the next 5 years. A lot of East Asian technology suppliers are already making them and deploying them. Warehouse automation has fundamentally gone through three big sort of transitionary phases. We started off with fixed mechanized systems, which were high efficiency, but ultimately low flexibility, lots of single points of failure, but good utilization of buildings. We've now gone through the kind of AMR phase, so flexible robotics, scalability, modularity, systems where your AMR fleets can change size and you can flex to deal with those seasonal demands. We're now into the kind of AI phase of warehouse deployment. So we're looking at intelligent orchestration, we're looking at software leading physical changes within the warehouse, and increasingly those AI layers of information management are determining performance outcomes in the warehouse. The center of gravity for these kind of projects is moving away from hardware and more into those information-based decision layers. So from machines executing tasks to systems optimizing entire workflows. The most meaningful advances are not always the most visible ones. So robotics are continuing to mature and evolve. This is a fairly traditional AMR system. We're now seeing a lot more AI-driven optimization. So vision systems, system-wide software orchestration, and commercial deployment models like robot as a service, as opposed to just CapEx and upfront. We're also seeing retrofit as becoming more of a growing area within the industry, lots of legacy sites. And again, I mentioned the bipedal robots previously. We may well see those fit into entirely manual warehouses in the coming years, be it doing zone pick, case pick, trolley pick, etc. Future warehouse is not simply automated, it's increasingly intelligent. We're moving from static designs, so I mentioned those big hardware installations like shuttles, conveyor systems that don't change, to more elastic and adaptive environments, from predefined logic to predictive decision-making. Digital twins are playing a huge part of that AI revolution within warehousing, as well as machine learning and real-time optimization. So AMR fleets, much more kinetic systems where you can balance demands across a system. Things are moving increasingly quickly. This represents a fundamental shift in thinking. Warehouses are evolving from physical assets into data-driven performance systems. I mentioned rethinking ROI. Previously, we've purely thought in terms of FTEs, headcount, saving OPEX. Labour savings alone rarely capture the full value. We've got utilisation of buildings, error cost reduction. Inaccurate picks cost money, more returns. C to X processing is incredibly expensive and inefficient. Throughput per square metre and also throughput per cubic metre is a really interesting aspect as well. Traditional warehousing models think so much about the surface area of a warehouse. We need to think about using the whole cube of the building. It's much easier to do that with adaptive automation. Service level protection as well is a key area, and that's a huge part of most e-com business models at the moment. And ultimately, risk mitigation. So being able to adapt and flex either your site or your network of sites to deal with black swan events, which will probably become more common in the 21st century. Automation investments are being justified through risk-adjusted performance metrics, not purely cost reduction, which reflects a more measured and mature investment mindset. Automation introduces value, but also a new form of risk. Technology obsolescence cycles are shortening as development moves faster. Vendor ecosystems remain more and more fragmented as well. It's quite rare for one original equipment manufacturer to make everything that you need for your warehouse. Every warehouse has a different set of requirements. A vendor agnostic approach could be a lot stronger and a lot more agile in the future. But that integration is complex and is often underestimated. Also, underutilization of those automated assets can be a real destroyer of any potential ROI. Successful automation strategies are not strictly technology-led, they are architecture-led, commercially structured, and most importantly, operationally aligned. So making sure that the solution is right for the business, the people on the ground understand how it works, and that middle integration layer can get the most out of the technology assets and the operational team at the same time. Increasingly, competitive advantage lies less in equipment selection and more in that integration level that I just mentioned, and interoperability of the different systems. The ability to orchestrate multiple technologies, to evolve architectures over time, and to remain vendor agnostic where possible. Future-proofing is becoming a design principle rather than an afterthought. We know that all operations will change. Historical data that you may have based your system design on is only ever historical. It's not going to be today or the future. You have to really bake in growth, change, fluctuation, which is normally a good thing. It means that our designs quite often have that kind of flexibility baked in from the start. One of the most persistent misconceptions is that automation is primarily around that ROI and headcount reduction. I think it's much more positive to reframe that in terms of workforce transformation. So roles shifting from strictly manual execution, like picking, decant, stock moves, into more mid-level kind of management positions or technological issues. So things like exception management, team supervision, analytics, optimization, and supply chain management. The people in your warehouse, fundamentally, their responsibilities may go beyond the curtilage of your warehouse. Their responsibilities may leap out into your broader network. This changes the labour dynamics in a site, the skill requirement, and the organisational design. The most successful operations invest heavily in people adaptation as they do in technology and integration. So in terms of the future outlook, looking ahead, where are we going with the future of warehouse automation? I think a lot of people will have different takes on what this looks like. From my perspective, I think the decision-making in a warehouse will become more automated. So what kind of storage medium stock is held in? Are predictive AI models going to give us an overview of where orders are coming from and against what kind of SKUs? We're going to see greater modularity in designs to deal with that flexibility and expansion that I've mentioned previously. We're going to look at continuous optimization of systems. So AI-powered warehouse management, warehouse execution systems that adapt over time, use data going through the warehouse to make them physically self-sustaining and more efficient. And I think also we're going to see automation in broader networks. So instead of having an automated warehouse, you may have a network of automated warehouses. Because of the nature of flexible automation assets like AMRs, you may look at a fleet of AMRs that you could migrate between different sites to deal with different levels of demand. So an embedded network strategy rather than as isolated automation initiatives. So the future warehouse, I think, will be defined by adaptability. In terms of final takeaway, I think warehouse automation is evolving from a purely efficiency tool into a strategic engine for resilience, scalability, and performance stability in an increasingly diverse marketplace and with market pressures that we can't yet fully understand or comprehend as society changes. The winners will not simply automate faster, they will design smarter, more adaptive operating architectures to roll with the punches. So that was my whistle-stop tour of what I think the future of warehouse automation looks like. Thank you very much for coming and watching my slides. If anyone has got any questions, I think the team at the back have got a microphone, so please do let me know. And I'd be really interested to hear if you've got any particular dilemmas or any kind of challenges around warehouse automation you're facing in your businesses at the moment. Yeah, and if you don't, that's fine.
Just regarding the rethinking of the ROI.
Yeah.
I'm more on a sort of shipper side rather than MSP side. Do you think the industry's there?
No. So I mentioned things like surface area as opposed to cube of the building. I think for most people, it's easier to think about the ROI just in terms of FTEs and labour saving. There's a whole range of statistics that impact your business proposition, from last mile trunking, your cost to serve, like I said, the cubic utilisation of your building, cost per location in terms of storage. I don't think the industry is there yet at all. From a lot of the customers I've worked with over the past few years, most of the cost models I've seen have been, and business cases I've seen, have been strictly FTE based. Yes, yeah. So I think even in the sort of duration of my career, about a decade ago, a decent ROI could be 5 to 6 or 7 years. Now people tend to talk more about 2 years. So I think there's a pressure there to shorten and truncate that ROI period. It has to obviously be dealt with on a case-by-case basis. But I think by looking at automating multiple sites and making smart networks for customers, I think we can squeeze that ROI period. Thank you. Hello.
Really nice to hear you. I think we've been following each other on LinkedIn for years.
Yes.
Yeah. It was really cool to actually see you in person and actually see the presentation. I think you mentioned something about, I think my question is more about the business case. So traditionally, what sort of sells in the boardroom is we're going to reduce labor, we're going to reduce rent, or we're going to reduce transport costs. Right? So those are the hardcore savings that actually open that boardroom open to sign the check. Recently, one thing we've been looking at over the last maybe 2-3 years is cost to serve. Mm-hmm. Right? So that one KPI moves it from an operational KPI in terms of things like throughput uplift, FTE reduction, blah, 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 to a financial KPI, right? The cost to serve this customer will then reduce by X%.
Yeah.
Traditionally, building that cost to serve model has been incredibly difficult.
Yes.
Because we don't have the granular visibility of consumable utilization and things like that. So building that cost to serve model, even in businesses that I've been in, has been traditionally difficult. What has been your experience in using cost to serve as a KPI to justify automation?
Yeah, no, it's a really good question. Thank you. As with all parts of solution design, your answer is only ever as good as the input assumptions you put into your model or into your tool to assess cost to serve. Quite often you can build your model in such a way that you're focusing on the parts of the model that have the most sensitivity. So although you could look at how much does it cost to run the canteen if I have so many headcounts in a site, or how big is the car park? And I have worked with customers in the past where they have considered those as part of their cost to serve. It is important, but like I said, there is a sensitivity analysis that you have to do to build into that cost to serve model. I think ultimately that might be a great way for AI to help the industry. We could, give an AI agent the books of a business, explain where are they actually spending their money. But like I said, there will always be a certain amount of assumptions. And again, you can only base that on historical data. You're not looking at what your cost to serve realistically is going to be in the future without making assumptions about growth, inflation, new labour laws, workers' rights bills, etc. So it will always be assumption based. I think any collaboration with a customer where you are putting together that core business case for their senior leadership to engage with, you just need to be really transparent about what those assumptions are. And then, that gives you something to talk about with them. You can fine tune the business case and then get to something that, although you're still trying to predict the future, which is never easy, you should at least get to something that most people are comfortable with in your stakeholder group. Thank you. Yes, yeah. Other LMMs are available. Yes, yeah.
You talked a little bit about kind of agnostic systems. So we're probably not the only ones. Well, we're definitely not the only ones out there where one of the biggest blockers to automation has been the kind of back end systems and the integration associated with it. So we're now commencing a pretty big automation project, and kind of looking ahead to the future, there's going to be ample more opportunity. How do you kind of, though, I guess, square the circle on having different, allowing yourself to have different different providers within your warehouse without almost encountering that kind of initial integration cost every time? Have you seen anyone do that pretty successfully?
Yeah, so speaking from personal experience, things like digital twin and emulation are absolutely key. Working really closely with those third-party suppliers, especially if you're working in an integrated project where you've got multiple technologies that are meant to be working in sync. If you don't get the brain of the warehouse right, you're never going to be able to leverage the best return on investment on that hardware. We've had some great success recently creating a digital twin and an emulation for a multi-supply environment. We've worked very closely with two different technology suppliers at the same time. They've got their own black box emulations of their different systems, be it an AGV network or something like a pallet crane or pallet shuttle system. We've been able to then integrate that with our warehouse execution system to emulate the system. We have found bugs before we've got to site as well. So, and that is a direct result of successfully emulating before something's built. There are obviously upfront, from our perspective, operational costs to building that model. They're not easy things to make, but getting into that level of writing the APIs, getting the messaging, visibility of how different systems are talking to each other at a warehouse execution level has avoided time lost on site during commissioning of a big system. So we've been able to test system logic, crane logic, completely virtually. It's also a great way to engage with our customers because they can put different order datas or to different order profiles. They can put different SKU selections into things before they're built. So we can really stress test systems. So it's doable. It is doable, and I think emulation is the best way to do that because it's a digital twin of reality. You're playing with your warehouse before it's physically built, especially for large projects like yours, where that is a timely and costly thing, and you want it to be working from day one. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't know if anybody's had this experience, but where you want to get in like pilot tools so that you can see what's going on in lines on the warehouse, how things are being done, to be able to model effectively and maybe change. We've had a lot of pushback from being able to put those systems in place because effectively your 3PL supplier doesn't want to know everything that they're doing.
Yeah.
So and I think for me, and I've talked about it quite a lot across today, is about that sharing vision has to change going across warehouse transport and co-pack if we're going to make a step change that we all want.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. I think in a complex automated environment where you've got different suppliers and different automation providers in an integrated ecosystem, analytical oversight and insight into what the operation is actually doing day to day is really key for end users and operators. I don't know if it's something maybe in the future we can legislate for to make sure that certain technologies have open APIs, or that we can always get a dashboard out of any kind of automation system. We've already got that from a health and safety perspective, where things have to have SCADAs or CMMSs. It would be interesting if we could make that happen from a analytics insight as well, to check things like throughput so that operators can optimize their systems. No, so if you take your example where you can see you've had a quote for an amount, I would recommend you look at what if you didn't do it. What are the risks there? And use that to quantify a response to your stakeholders and your business. So if you deploy a system and you don't know if it's going to work, if you don't deploy a system and you keep going in your brownfield site, we know that historically brownfield sites have a lot of integration challenges. I imagine you'd be trying to keep the site live whilst you're making the change, or at least doing it in a phased delivery. Again, digital twin would be really key there. I think the quote that you've received is, you'd need to look at what if you didn't do it and it went wrong because you didn't have the insight of a digital twin. How much could that cost your business? Okay.
That's basically cost avoidance, right?
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Sure. No, absolutely. Yeah. Okay. No, happy to have that chat. Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. Well, thank you very much, everyone. Cheers.